All right. Welcome everybody to the Yay Community Ask a Coach Hour. Sorry for the late start, technical difficulties. That's how these things go. But yeah, welcome everybody to Ask a Coach Hour. We're here with Christina V. Gusby, and you are the founder of Christina Victoria Cosmetics and an expert in leadership and team management. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here with myself and all the other Yay entrepreneurs. Perhaps you could just give us a quick introduction about yourself and how you got into the beauty industry and a little bit about your career.
Okay, so again, I'm Christina Gusby. So as far as I've always had a passion for makeup. I did the regular 9 to 5 like most people, and I realized that, I still had this tremendous love and passion to do makeup. And so one of the things that I did to start that path towards that was I auditioned for MAC, which is a huge cosmetics company. The first time I didn't get selected. So about 5 years later, I was fortunate enough to be hired on as a freelance makeup artist, which was such an amazing opportunity. I learned so much about makeup, and that later led me to working for Chanel for about a year as a business manager. And Chanel just took it to a different level because it incorporated skincare and things were more on the high end spectrum. During that, though, when I was freelancing for MAC, I was still working in the healthcare benefits administration, which I've done for about 20 years. And I started managing about 8 years ago in that. So for me, I wanted to make sure that I at least gave my passion a try. And I'm happy I did, because there's some really great opportunities that have happened since then. So, okay. Yeah.
Excellent. And what's it been like? What's your experience been like having to manage both your own business as an entrepreneur while also working, obviously, as a team manager and being a mom? So I think you're quite an inspiration for all the women out there who think, it's difficult to do multiple things, but you're proof that you can do all those things and have your own venture that's successful.
Thank you. Well, it has been, it was a little stressful at times. Starting your own business is a big risk, because when you start, you are initially investing your own money, as most business people do, unless you get a loan or something like that. And I didn't really want to do that. And I had done a lot of research with a lot of different companies that I could work with as far as private label manufacturing companies. And a lot of them, if you want to have your own nail polish, body lotion, candle, perfume, there's a private label manufacturing company that does that. A lot of the companies that I researched, they have a certain amount that you have to purchase. And I was like, this is kind of like not in my budget, because I have 2 kids. So it took me a little bit longer to get started than I wanted to, but I also just made a sacrifice and said, okay, this is what I'm going to commit to. And I started preparing months before an actual launch date. And it was pretty great, because the year that I started, the company is also the same year that I graduated from college. I went back to school in my 30s, and it took me forever to get my bachelor's degree, because I kept starting and stopping because I was so stressed out with the kids and work. But for my master's, I said, I'm not taking any breaks. So that year was very phenomenal for me, because not only did I get an opportunity to start my business, I also graduated college. And it was just a great example for my kids to see that, you may lose a lot of sleep. You may not be able to hang out a lot with your friends, but if you stick to something that you truly believe in, you can do it. So, and I like the fact too, that my kids have really bought into it. They helped me out a lot, you know. So it was stressful, and it's still stressful now. I'm glad that I made the commitment to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think there's a lot of young entrepreneurs out there who have a lot to learn from you, which is why we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence, also known as soft skills. Emotional intelligence, as you and I discussed, is a bit, you know, of a posh term, but it's soft skills. And leadership is a big one of those. So I think if we can kind of dive into, let's say, your experience with soft skills or emotional intelligence and how important they've been throughout your career path and helped you to get to where you are today. And, you know, in your experience, then we can have a follow-up question. What does it mean to you to be a strong leader? And what does that look like in your experience?
So it's very easy if you're very ambitious and you're self-motivated and you want to be very successful in, let's just say, the corporate America arena, it's very easy, I think, for you to kind of be pushed along into becoming a leader, especially if you have someone who sees your potential and they support that and they prepare you for it. So fortunate for me, I had a woman who recognized me early on in my 20s and said, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get you prepared. And I kind of started off being a team lead like in my early 20s. And then, you know, after marriage and all this stuff, I just kind of was like, well, whatever job I have. But it came back around to me in my 30s, and another woman who was like, hey, you know, I think you have, you know, I think you're going to be great in this role. And I started doing that. You know, you ultimately think, oh, I have a promotion. This is the title that I now carry. This is the amount of money that's now added into my paycheck. But it's so much more than that, because it's all about your relationships that you have with your team. And initially when I started, I kind of took over another team. And what happens sometimes is you have teams that have opportunities to rebuild them or to restructure them to make them, you know, successful. And I think I was good at being a people person because I'm a social butterfly, but I started doing a lot of research, like watching YouTube videos, reading books about what it's like being a leader as a woman, what it's like being a minority woman leader, and just being a leader in the workplace. And that just kind of helped me to understand the position I was in. And it was about 2 or 3 years ago that I realized the power that I had with the effect that I was having on everyone who would say to me, thank you for believing in me. Thank you for inspiring me. And, you know, I'm just going along doing what I do on a normal daily basis, you know. And then I began to value the position that I was in. I don't think I got it at first. I think I was like, oh, here's my business card. Here's my resume. This is what I do. And this is the role I have. And then one day it just hit me like, you are in such a huge role to make a tremendous impact on people's lives. And I dedicated myself to keep that as my vision and to constantly, you know, just make myself better, because as a leader, you never get to there. I feel like there's never a top that you get to, because you are constantly evolving. You're constantly learning. We live in such an ever-changing world. And so you have so many different people from different ages, different backgrounds that come to you, and you really have to be able to connect with them. Because that's how you make your team successul. And, you know, a lot of times it's stressful in the workplace. It's all about the numbers. I don't care where you work at, that bottom line. And sometimes businesses, they have a boom and it's crazy, and you want people to be flexible and work all these hours and do all these things. And at the same time, you got to keep them motivated, and you got to be able to connect with them. So that's how it's been for me in understanding the role that I've been in and the importance of that.
Wow, I think that's really crucial for a lot of the young entrepreneurs to hear. What I got from you is that the power of kindness and, let's say, compassion in the workplace and for your team really goes a long way in ensuring that, your team is on board with you. And as you mentioned, when they're inspired by you and they see your passion and your drive, then they want to be part of that team and they want to work harder. It's like your passion and your care motivates them. And then you get this really good sense of team morale. And I also heard you say, never stop evolving. And I think that's also really important that, as a leader, you're never really satisfied. You're constantly striving to see how you can do better or go further or, even increase that bottom line, if you will. That's really a core component of being a leader is never thinking that you've reached that top, that the top is, let's say, it's infinitely out there. You never can achieve it.
Right.
Okay, awesome. So I think we can move on to some of the questions that we have here. So you talked a little bit about, that people kind of worked with you from the start of your career, that people saw something in you. So I want to know, how far along in your career did you really learn the value of these soft skills? You mentioned that it was like working with a team, you really understood what it meant to become a leader. But when did you really see that care, compassion, drive, ambition were really more important than, let's say, how smart you were in the workplace?
I think early on, when I first started, it's interesting because I was put in a role to lead someone who thought that they were going to get the position that I received. So automatically, your mindset has to change. And the way that I approached it was, I had a conversation with the individual and I said, because they were very upfront about it and they were not happy at all. And because they had been in that role leading the team before I came along, I said, what I'm going to do is I want to partner with you. There are a lot of opportunities that we have to learn from one another. So I want this to be a partnership. And I'd like for you to continue to be in a leadership role on my team. So let me make you the team lead. And I think it was important to show her that not only that I had a compassion and I had empathy for what happened, just from her experience, but I also expected what she was doing prior to me coming along and her role that she had. So I didn't want to, I think it's a certain level of respect, the way you have to approach a situation that's so sensitive. So I think I learned that particular thing early on, but I think that it wasn't until maybe halfway through I started to see how important it was to have conversations with people, to really, when you take on a role and you're coming in as the manager for a new team, I think it's important to set aside time to talk to someone just to get to know them. So, things like, how long have you been with the company? What would you like to do with the company? What are your career goals? About personal things, like if they are married, if they have children, because at any given time, someone will come in your office with a situation that you have to have empathy for, men and women. And I think that once I understood that, and I understood that could happen, I thought it was important for me to really, really make sure that I was able to connect with people and to continue to build those relationships, and just understand what they wanted as far as their career level. Because you get people who they're at the company just to make a paycheck. They have no desire to move up in the company. They want to do something that's totally outside of that genre that they're working in. And I think you can have a very pivotal role in that, into getting them to that next career level, whether it's with the company that they work with or what they choose to move into. So I think the big thing in all of it is just the relationships, like really understanding it's not about timesheets, administrative tasks, because that's a part of the role too. But really how you connect with people on your team, it's really how successful your team will be. And I've enjoyed seeing the benefits from doing that. Just really keeping that at a very important focus, in the role. Mm-hmm.
No, that's excellent. And I think, the communication and relationship building aspect, you can't fake that. Let's say
Right.
if you're a team leader and you show that you're interested in people's past and their futures and in their dreams and their ambitions, then they really feel like you actually are interested in who they are beyond the workplace. And that's something you can't fake. So
Right.
That's really important. Cool. So we have quite a few viewers. No one has posted questions yet, but we have some questions that they posted to me in the WhatsApp chats that we have with all of the Yay community members.
Okay.
So I think we can, maybe we'll talk a bit more and then I'll jump into those questions.
Okay.
Perhaps we can just discuss. So. Yeah, you've kind of shared with us already some personal stories, so that's really good. I think we've actually already covered too as well, the 3 kind of most important soft skills that you think, which are communication, relationship building, and compassion. So maybe if we can also do the 3 most important, let's say, characteristics of a good leader. So maybe there are a bit of overlap there as well, but what are 3 of the things that you found were the most important for you to be a good leader? And are those any different from the most important soft skills you just mentioned? Because they could be the same.
I do think, like, with the emotional intelligence, it's so important to understand yourself and understand how you deal with people. So I think it's important to, again, as I mentioned, one of the top things is relationships. You have to be willing to build those relationships with your team. I don't think it's beneficial to come in and just seclude yourself in your office and never go out on the floor and do temperature checks, even something as simple as saying good morning. I think people need to know that you exist and that you are part of the team. So when you do that, you can keep a pulse of the team and what's happening out there. So relationships is very important. I think you have to also have in your mindset that you are essentially a mentor for your team, for people, because you are ultimately responsible for coaching and developing them, because not everyone on your team is going to be a star player. You have to find the balance of, okay, my star players, I have to be willing to release them so that they can move on to their next career path. And for those who aren't really doing as well, what can I do to make sure that I give them the tools and resources they need to be successful in this role? So I think you have to see yourself as a mentor, ultimately like a coach or a teacher. And I think you just really have to have empathy. You really have to understand that anything can happen with people. They can come to you with an emergency, with their kids, their families, and you have to really be understanding enough to know that just to care enough, for them and not make them feel like, well, you have to be at work. It's important that you have to be able to say, I understand. Is there anything that you need? And I think within that, you build that team camaraderie to where it's not just me saying this, your team supports you as well. So I think it's important to have that empathy because it spreads to your team. It sets the tone for your team with the type of leader that you are. And people are more willing to do well for you when they feel like you respect them and you value what they do. So I think you have to be genuine about being that person because people can tell if it's fake. So you really have to be genuine about that. And that really helps all those, that mentorship and those relationships that you're building with your team.
Great. So I have more than 3 for sure. I've just been noting everything down. If you see me looking to the side, I'm writing notes. So I have empathy for the members of your team. Also knowing yourself, I think, is really important. And I like what you said about knowing, like, what stresses you out or what things make you uncomfortable. Knowing that about yourself is also just as important as knowing your team, because if you don't understand your own, like, let's say, trigger points, then you're not going to be aware of what those things are in the office that you need to, like, work around and maybe put a little bit more effort into. We have connectivity, relationship building. And I also really liked what you said about being a mentor. I think that's important to know, that when you step into that leadership role, as an entrepreneur, as a team lead, you're really someone that others look up to, and you have to know that and work within that kind of headspace that you are a mentor for the people around you. So those are really good, really good. So we have some questions now. Aisha Ali, who is from Kampala, Uganda, she asks, in a situation where someone wants to micromanage, how do you go about that? And I'm sure you've been in a situation like this before. So I think the broader question is, how do you work with difficult people in the office?
So I personally feel that micromanaging is not a good leadership skill. Because it's basically saying you don't trust your team to carry on the duties in their role. Now, I do think that there are times when you have to keep a close eye on things because of deadlines and maybe something of importance, something has been escalated. So that kind of comes into play, but I think it's a fine line. It's a balance in how you approach that. If you are working with someone who micromanages you, which I've been in that position before, it just didn't work well for me. And I knew that I needed to either possibly move under different leadership or find a new role. Someone like me, I'm a very independently driven worker. If you tell me what to do, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability and then some, and I'm going to try to be the best at it. And it made me feel uncomfortable that somebody was constantly watching me. I think also in this day and time that we're in, it's important for leaders to understand that micromanaging can come off the wrong way. It can come off as bullying. It can, it's just certain behaviors that go with that are not always positive. So I feel like if you're in a situation like that, you have to ultimately decide, like, is this the role for me? Is this the environment that I want to be in? Because it's your career. You own your career. So you get to decide what you want for you, because it's your career. I think working with difficult people, though, sometimes you have to isolate yourself from the madness. I think it's okay to say good morning and that kind of thing. But I think you have to know, that energy that you're bringing it's not for me. And, I respect you, but if it's not someone who's like directly your leader and it's maybe a peer, you just have to be able to have that balance with how you interact with that person. And it is challenging. Ultimately, you'll have to decide, is this the best position or role for me? Because, it's not always good or comfortable to be in that type of situation.
Yeah. So if, for like example, Aisha, she has her own nonprofit organization in Uganda. So if it's someone in like her core management team who's micromanaging others, or even micromanaging her, for example, I think your advice is to kind of like take a step back and understand your barriers and your boundaries with that person, and maybe set limits to how you want to work with them, or also decide if it's someone that, that style, if it doesn't work for your team or for you, then, maybe you have to make some hard decisions, because as you mentioned, micromanaging can be not just bad for other members of the leading team, but I would suppose also members of your staff, who, as you mentioned, maybe it comes across as bullying. So maybe really think long-term vision if that person is someone you want in your enterprise with you.
And I think too, because it's your business, that's your name, that's your brand. So you want the best representation of it. And if you have someone who's working for you, who's micromanaging members on your team, I do think you have to have a conversation with them just to maybe kind of just open up some dialogue and understand why they behave the way that they do. Sometimes perception is not always the same as what a person intends. And so sometimes having a very objective conversation with them where you have neutral ground can really help set a positive experience moving forward. And you'll find out early on in the conversation, really, if the person is intending to be that type of leader or if they're not. And sometimes it just really opens the doors for a positive relationship, But then, like you said, you may have to make a decision like you're not the best fit for my brand because this is not what we want. And I think you can set the expectation and see if that person is willing to make those changes. Then if not, then the next decision is finding someone who's better suited for that role.
Definitely, definitely. So first thing is open up a dialogue, have a conversation, and maybe understand why they're acting that way, because perhaps they don't know that they're acting that way. And then if you don't see any change, then perhaps it's time to assess how you want your brand to be recognized and if you want that person to be a part of your brand. Cool.
Exactly.
So we have another good question from Gilbert, who's from Zambia, and he runs an e-commerce platform. And his question is similar to something we've discussed earlier. So he asked, what do you do if you have a hardworking and high-performing employee, but they always want to do things their way, sometimes arguing about the solutions to problems with you as the CEO?
So that's a good question. If you have someone who is hardworking and, that's a good employee, of course, you want to make sure that they understand you value their hard work and their dedication to the team. But I think that you have to really probably have a conversation with them to understand why do you, my perception is, because sometimes there is no textbook on how to have these conversations with people. So
no, definitely not.
It, right? So why do you essentially feel that the way that you're doing it is the best way versus what we've discussed or what we were?
This is the train we talked about.
Right? I knew the train was going to happen. I live by a train. So you really have to find out for them, why do they think that the way they choose to do something is the better way versus what you would prefer? I think a lot of times the communication part is so important when you work with people, and we miss those opportunities of communication to really get a resolution to it. Because we want those people who work hard and all that. That's great for our team. But if we have an expected way or a required way to do something, you have to do that. I mean, sometimes there's no way around that. So I just think it's, just to start to have that conversation and just understand why they think that the way that they're doing it is better than what actually it should be.
Yeah. So again, it comes down to communication. I mean, one time my dad told me that communication is key, and he's right. Yes. Everything revolves around good communication.
Right.
So so to answer Gilbert's question, communicate your expectations clearly and how you envision things working, and hear from them as well, and then see if you can come to, some kind of middle ground or consensus or better understanding. Again, similar to the person who's micromanaging, of why they're doing things the way that they're doing or why they think that their way is right, and have this dialogue. And that also ties into what you said about respect, because if you're willing to listen to the person and hear their side of the story, that also shows that you respect them. And, maybe perhaps even if they don't agree with you at the end of the conversation, they'll be grateful that you took the time to listen and hear them out. So I think that's really critical. Cool. So we have some other questions from the WhatsApp groups that I'll go into. So one question that we had from Rwanda was, how do you balance being both emotional and strong as a leader? And I think this is something that a lot of young entrepreneurs especially struggle with, because they are seen as young and maybe not as mature as an older entrepreneur? So how do they still, have that respect and that like authority while still being emotional and understanding and empathetic, as you discussed before?
So I think that, especially if you're young, you want people to see past your age and to respect you for the role that you're in. And I think one of the best things that you can do with your approach is to set the expectations early on, for the people that work for you, for your team. These are the expectations that I have as a leader as far as how I want my team to function. It's hard for, I think, anyone who is young or even who's new to a role, like, oh, you're a new supervisor. You're trying to establish and get that respect. Or for instance, if you work for a company that's used to promoting from within and they hire you from outside the company. So we all sort of have that kind of, I don't want to say barrier, but that thing we have to work through. It's just like, with the age. But I think it's important, regardless of the role. Like the most recent role I have, I came from outside of the company. And so it was, who is she? Like, does she know anything about this? I kind of had to step in, like, listen, okay. But I think that, taking that type of approach and setting the expectations, eventually people will begin to get that respect for you and look past your age, your experience. And a good leader, regardless of what age you are, how old you are, how long you've been doing it, or if you're new or whatever the case may be, a good leader is recognizable and you will make a profound impact with your team. So it's kind of like, emotional, I think just emotional, we all have feelings, but I think understanding the balance of your feelings. Like for me, when I was a lot younger, I was told that I was very sensitive. And so that I do recognize in myself that I can be a sensitive and emotional person, but I have to learn how to decide which situation would get that type of reaction, because a lot of times in our minds, we perceive things a way that they actually are not, or we take things to heart. And when you look back on it, let's say 6 months, 6 weeks from now, you're like, wow, I should have. Why did I do that? Why did I do that? So it's just understanding yourself and your personality, and then really, just finding a balance with that, because you're going to be constantly evolving as a leader. Like there's no top. And I think understanding that you're in tune to, okay, now this type of thing really annoys me, but how am I going to react? Because ultimately I'm a professional, and, you just don't want to react in a way that sends the wrong type of impression, or something that sets a negative environment, So,
yeah. Definitely. And I think what you've kind of said throughout this discussion is that to get the most out of your team is actually to be empathetic and to show vulnerability and to be open with your team. So although in some instances it may seem like to be a strong leader, you have to be like really harsh with your team, or just like really, I'm the boss, this is the way it is, I don't want to hear anyone else's opinion, that actually doesn't work. And that being emotional and being a strong leader can actually be one and the same thing. Right. And that, you don't have to kind of throw your emotions to the side and be, let's say, like a robot as a leader to get things done your way. That it's actually kind of counterintuitive, and to be a strong leader, you can be really emotional. Right. I think that's what you've been saying this whole discussion. Cool. So another question that we had from the WhatsApp groups, this one was from Ghana, was about some tips or tools that you use to communicate well. And they specifically asked with potential clients or customers. So perhaps this we can call on both your managerial experience, but also your work with your own venture, Christina Victoria. How do you use these soft skills to really communicate well with potential clients, or potential customers to really have them like buy into your vision?
Well, I think the most important thing is to know the business of the business that you're in.
Okay.
I always say that's very important because you never know who's going to be sitting across the table from you. People who've been in that business and who know it, they can tell sometimes if you're kind of bluffing. I mean, essentially, there may be a situation where you may have to kind of fake it till you make it, but you can't always do that because you're going to have to be able to prove that you know what you're talking about, but you're also going to have to convince people to buy into what you're selling or what you're about. So I think for me, because I've been in healthcare for so long when it comes to benefits administration, that's kind of like something that started early on and I know like the back of my hand. But there are so many different things when it comes to benefits administration from hospitals and doctor offices and customer service call centers. There's a lot of different things that, you know, you'll learn with that. I think for the cosmetics, what was important for me was because I'm so passionate about this and I want it to do very well, I need to know what's trending. I need to keep up with those who are in the same position role as me. You know, spring is a big time for launches, and then fall, what's happening in the summer. When you follow a lot of these brands, everybody kind of has the same thing going, but you also have to know what separates your brand from theirs, what's going to make people buy into your brands. Because you can...
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about, actually.
Yeah, you can get this product anywhere. I think for me, I wanted to really focus on more of a sisterhood type thing, providing a quality product at an affordable price, and really also making sure that I am working charitably. I'm out there in the community talking to people who want to be entrepreneurs, and I'm able to give them information. Because, you know, sometimes people say, hey, I think I want to make cupcakes, and they have no idea what goes into that. They don't understand the business part of it. So I think you have to do your research. You just really have to know the business of the business you're in. And then you just have to kind of just own it, because it's going to be a learning process throughout the way. But nobody's going to buy into anything that you're doing if you don't buy into it. So you have to believe in it as well. And you just, you have to show that, you know. So, you know, it's, I think that's ultimately, you know, important. Those are some of the things that are important regarding that.
Definitely, definitely. So I got from there, you have to know your industry. So know what's trending to be able to communicate what you do and your business properly with clients. Know the business of your business inside and out, which I really like that expression. And then, as you mentioned, you know, kind of know your niche or your messaging. I think what I got from what you were saying is, you know, if you're thinking that you're a new beauty line and you're going to compete with MAC, you're probably wrong. But if you can say what sets you apart from MAC and what makes you different and unique. So for yours, it's the idea of sisterhood, and that, you know, your brand is grounded in, let's say, 20 plus years of knowledge in the cosmetics industry. And that, yeah, you're able to communicate that message through to potential clients. They can really, one, see your vision because it's genuine, and two, they understand like why they would buy your product over MAC's product, which is this idea of sisterhood and quality at a manageable price point. And so that's really important, I think.
And they can buy both. That's what I do. I still buy both MAC and Chanel. So on in my corporate America job, I have MAC, Chanel, and Christina Victoria cosmetics. So to be able to visualize that, to see that, it's like, wow, this is mine. What I did. And because most people, you know, they may not essentially buy into you at first, but then once they do, because if it's a great product, because it has to be a great product, they'll buy yours along with other people's. But, you know, referrals are everything, you know, word of mouth, you know, and we live in such a huge social media environment now, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the potential is, you know, it's endless. So
Definitely, definitely.
yeah.
And of course, that's where your first clients are always going to come from,
Exactly.
is that word of mouth, that reputation that you've built within the community.
Exactly. Exactly.
Great. And someone had also asked, I believe this is another question from Uganda, is how do you, so we talked about how you're able to communicate these things, maybe face to face, when people really meet you. But what if you're exchanging with potential clients or potential customers via email or just virtually? How are you still able to communicate that messaging loud and clear so people really can feel like, let's say, your compassion through a computer screen? Or maybe you have a tactic that when it comes to representing your brand, you don't work that way. You always have a phone call so people can really hear you. How do you go about this?
Well, I think a lot of times it's people will tell you that their preferred method of contact is via email. Sometimes they'll even say text messages, which I think text, a lot of things can get misinterpreted on text. Because you'll have never-ending texts where you've answered the same question 20 times and they just don't understand it. But I think a lot of people nowadays prefer email because of the time constraints. So I think ultimately what's important is that if a client says, I prefer for you to contact me via email, you know, that's an opportunity for you to kind of set the precedence. Like, you know, hey, hi, this is Christina. It was great meeting you. Great talking with you. I'm excited that you're interested in my product. Do you want to create that vibe, something positive, something that pops, that grabs them initially? You don't want like a long overdrawn email. I mean, you can maybe include what your company is about, that kind of thing, but you want to keep it to the point to where it grabs their attention, but it doesn't, they don't get distracted by after the second or third paragraph. I think what's important is if you cannot meet somebody in person, then pick up the phone. We are so far away from talking on the phone now. And I think that in email, sometimes there may be something that they don't understand or could be misinterpreted, where you can just cure that just by a telephone conversation. And then if the person is able to meet you in person, then set up a lunch or coffee. Sometimes when you start dealing with people who are not maybe within the same area that you are, the best way to communicate would be it would be through telephone. But I mean, we have these live sessions right now. You can Skype someone, you can communicate with them through the computer. So I think there are so many opportunities of communication now to where you don't actually have to meet them in person if you can't, because sometimes that's going to be difficult. But let them know that you're a real person. You know, have that phone call, leave a message. Hey, this is Christina. It was, you know, great talking to you. I'd like to connect more with you. When are you available? And when they see that you're interested in them, you know, that helps too, because you're building that relationship.
Definitely, definitely. So the message here is don't feel that you're constrained to email. Like if you want to connect with people, even if you can't meet them in a physical space, like set up a Google Hangouts or a Skype chat where they can see you and they can really feel like they can connect with you. That, you know, you don't need to feel like you're limited to text and email, which are very disconnected mediums. You know, you don't know who you're talking to on the other side.
Exactly.
Okay. Great. So our last question that we have from the WhatsApp groups is someone asked, and I believe they're also from Ghana, in interviews, how can you introduce yourself and communicate your strengths and weaknesses while still coming across confident and competent in your skills? So, you know, whether this is, let's say, your experience with job interviews, or if you've ever been interviewed about Christina Victoria Cosmetics for a radio or TV program. It's, again, this question is, how do you be vulnerable and emotional while still coming across strong?
So I think there's a fine line with that. I think that when you're interviewing with someone or someone's interviewing you, you're ultimately trying to sell yourself. You're trying to convince them that you are the best choice. And so you can still have that real life, authentic personality, but there's a way to where how you do it, it's not like coming off like you're about to hang out at the bar, you know, because sometimes have these interviews. There are some people that interview with you, they're very like sit up straight, they're very businesslike. But I think if the opportunity presents itself for you to just kind of spark that little bit of your personality to let them see who you are, I think you should do that. But you also have to not go overboard with it. I think, you know, when you're talking to them, you're selling yourself, you're selling your business, you're showing them, you know, your resume is out there. So they're looking at the skills and everything that you say that you're capable of doing, and you want to be able to have conversations about that. One of the things that I've often seen just in me interviewing people for roles at, you know, at my company is that the resume looks great, but or don't have enough examples, or you're not talking to how your skill set. You're kind of brazing over the questions. And, you know, companies, they like to ask these scenario type questions. And people are not able to talk to that. So I think you sort of have to practice, even if you have to, you know, look in the mirror and or even practice on someone else. And I think for me as a leader, if I have someone who's interested in another position in the company, because we are all about growing from within, I feel it's my responsibility to make sure, in a sense, that that person is prepared for that interview. I cannot have someone on my team go in an interview with a terrible resume, you know, or they're not even prepared to answer the question. And the thing that I always tell my team, please make sure your resume is a representative of what you actually do. Like if this is how the position started and now you're doing all these other things, you have to make a conscious effort to go out there and update your resume. Because when you're sitting across the table from people, you know, they have this position that, oh, this is the role that we want you in. Okay, you have those skills, but what else do you have? What convinces us to hire you? So it's the same thing when you're trying to get people to buy into what you're doing. You know, it's important to make sure you can have that conversation and just truly explain who you are and what you offer. And that's the big thing. And like I said, you don't want to go overboard with the girl, yeah, kind of thing, because it would be easy for me to do that. But it's more so finding a balance of knowing when to do that and when not to do that.
Definitely. So I think what you've said about practicing is really, really essential, even if it means practicing with a friend or someone else from your team before you do the interview. That can be really beneficial to understanding how you come across. And also, you know, if you're, as you mentioned, glossing over, let's say, your key skill sets, because these are obviously things that you don't want to gloss over in an interview. You really want to let them shine. And then what you said about, preparing and updating your resume. I think for a lot of our young entrepreneurs, you maybe think you don't need a resume, but you never know when things will come along, and having your CV or your resume prepared and ready and updated and really reflective of your skill sets can be beneficial. So even though you're an entrepreneur and you've started your own business, keep your CV updated, I think, is the moral there. And make sure it genuinely reflects what your skills are, even if your role within the company has changed. So for example, if you are the founder and you started out as the CFO and now you're the CEO, then that shift should be reflected in your CV.
Right, definitely.
Great. So I think we've covered all of the questions that we have, and time is just about up. So I wanted to ask you about some like personal anecdotes from your career. You've shared quite a few already, but was there any times that you can specifically remember where, let's say, your leadership was tested and you really felt like it was kind of a, let's say, a moment where you were able to really grow as a leader from that situation where, let's say, you were talking about barriers earlier, but maybe let's call it a hurdle, where you came up to a hurdle and you jumped over it and you tested yourself and the situation tested you. If you could share some stories, that would be awesome.
I think I think one of the hardest things is sometimes when you are a woman in the workplace and all you're surrounded by is men. So you are ultimately trying to forge your way to, in this position and earn that level of respect from people. I think one of the things, because I feel like I've learned so many lessons, but I think one of the toughest lessons for me was to understand that you cannot help everybody. And what I mean by that is that when you have people on your team who you see the potential that they have, and maybe they're underperforming, you see the potential that they have to want it for themselves just as bad as you, because it then becomes very frustrating when you are trying to, in a sense, convince yourself that they're worth keeping, and you're trying to convince the people that you report to that they're worth keeping. And you keep giving them all these different chances to improve, and it's not happening. And so for me, I think sometimes when you're very passionate about the role that you're in, you start believing, I don't want to say you overly believe in people, but you believe in them so much so that you're not realistic with the fact that, hey, you see their potential, but this is maybe not what they want for themselves. And unless they are willing to take the steps that are necessary to kind of change the course of their performance, there's only so much that you can do. So I think that was very hard for me, because I did have a situation like that led me into a ton of frustration, to the point where I felt like, what is the point? Because sometimes you'll find that not everybody is going to like you. And I feel like I'd rather you respect me. You don't have to like me, but I want you to respect what I bring to the table and what I'm doing. And, it's just in this workplace, because you have so many different personalities that you're really trying to connect to, it's hard to not be too hard on yourself when it doesn't turn out the way you want it to. And so that has been the hardest thing for me, because I love working with people. I love leading people, being a leader, but understanding that even when I set the expectations of how they should perform, what's required, they have to ultimately want it for themselves, and then they have to do it. And there's no excuse. No, you can have 10 different meetings with them, but until they make an effort to turn that around, it's really on them, especially if you've done everything that you're supposed to do to get them to that level. Because I think sometimes with leaders, they'll say, oh, I don't know why they're not doing their job. Then you need to ask yourself a question. Have you had a conversation with them? Have you given them the tools that they need and the resources to be successful in that role? Because if you haven't, that's where you have to start. Then once you've done that, then you can go from there. Because yes, it falls on them, but it starts with you. And sometimes people are just not the right fit for certain roles that they're into. So I think you have to be realistic about that as well.
Yeah, I think this comes back to what you were saying earlier about balance and knowing yourself. And I can see how that would be a really difficult situation when you have so much faith in an employee or a staff member, and they just continuously are underperforming. And, as you said, if you've had those discussions with them, you think that there's the potential for change, but for some reason things just don't connect, and they continue not to connect, then you have to realize, like, okay, I've put in the effort, and although I feel like maybe it's, a failure because I wanted this person to achieve this level, you have to let it go, and you have to realize that it's not on you, that you've done your part, and it's, there's got to be some meeting in the middle ground. And then if you've done all you can do, you got to let it go aside. And so knowing that moment or that balance, I think is really difficult, but as you mentioned, really crucial.
Yes.
Great. So we're out of time. It's now 5:30 here, but 11:30 for you. So maybe we can have, let's say, a few closing words or some key takeaways. I wanted to ask you earlier, what does it mean from your experience to be emotionally intelligent? I think that would be a good closing. And then, yeah, if you have some key points that you want to send our audience home with, that would be great.
I think for me, what's important in being emotionally intelligent, especially in a leadership role, is just really being able to connect with people and build those relationships. Essentially, the relationships you build with your team, that's going to play a huge role in how successful they are. It's going to play a role in just the team camaraderie. Like, we are a team, we're together, we're one. You don't really want that type of separateness in your team, just different behaviors.
Hello?
Energy.
Oh.
Yes.
All right. I don't know what's happened, but it looks like we've lost Christina somehow, which is such a pity because she was just giving us some really great insights. Yeah, I guess we can give her one more minute and see if she comes back. Perhaps her computer died. These things happen. I'm not sure. All right. Very strange. Okay, well, I'm gonna say, okay, so she says she can see me. I don't know if you guys can see her. I'm just seeing a black screen. Yeah, I don't know if, let me just check the Facebook broadcast and see if you guys are able to see her. And if not, then I'm just gonna, let me just check this, see what's happening. Okay, it looks like you guys can still see her. So, okay, Christina, if you want to go ahead and give us your closing remarks, because there's something wrong with mine, but everyone else can see you and hear you.
Okay, so just
send me a message when you're done.
Okay. So I think it's very important, like I said, as a leader, to make sure you establish and build those relationships with people, because ultimately that's going to be a key element to the successful.
Okay, it looks like you guys
as an entrepreneur, I think it's just really important that if you have a dream or a passion,
like I said, as a leader, to make sure you establish and build those.
Pursue your passion and your dream, and just to stay focused and to, just to keep moving forward with. I hear like I can hear the feedback, like I hear myself talking also, so that kind of distracted me. But yeah, I think if you have a passion for something and then you're really, it's something that you really want to do, I think you should give it your best try, because you may only get one chance to really do that. So I say follow your dreams, be passionate about it, be relentless about what you want when it comes to your business, and use all the resources that are available to be successful, to know the business of the business that you're in, and just to make you better. So that's pretty much it. Sending her a message to let her know that and I hope that made sense, because I got a little distracted with all the stuff going on.
Okay, so I'm just gonna sign off and say thank you so much to Christina. I'm not sure what's happening on my end, but I think this has been a really amazing and insightful session, and I really hope that everyone has enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed it. I think that there's some great takeaways. So I'm going to compile all of those for all of the viewers. So look out for that next week coming up on Facebook. And of course, if you guys need to connect with Christina, you can find her on the Yay community platform, where you can reach out to her directly, send her a message if you want to continue this discussion on leadership and emotional intelligence. Otherwise, thank you so much again, Christina, and thank you to everyone for your great questions and for tuning in. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for having me. I appreciate it.